Blake Schwank, Shawn Murray, welcome to the Veterans Voice Podcast. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's
Great.
a little bit warmer than earlier this week.
Yeah, it was like 0 degrees the other day.
Yeah, I can actually feel my toes.
Yeah, and we're all bald. That doesn't help.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming on the Veterans Voice Podcast. I'll have you guys do just a brief introduction. You guys are both veterans. I appreciate your service. Both ambassadors of Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center here in Colorado Springs. So, Blake, let's start with you. I know you've been on the show before, but just quick military history and then what you do today, and then Shawn will pass it off to you.
Great. Yeah, I'm Blake Schwank with CCS IT Pros or Colorado Computer Support. And spent 11 years in the Army. So grew up here in Colorado Springs, went to UCCS, did ROTC there, and then got commissioned as a Medical Service Corps officer, spent 3.5 years with the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, and then Fort Bliss down there to Fort Lewis, and then Fort Wainwright. So spent 3 years up at Fort Wainwright, which makes 10 below seem a little bit warm.
Yeah, for sure. It's cold out there.
But we got out of that and worked for a software development company, and the .com bust happened in 2001, became unemployed. So my wife and I started our company as Colorado Computer Support, and basically just doing IT services where I could find it because I had bills to pay. And then about 7 years in, we switched to what is called managed services. And so where we only work with businesses, and we fit in as their IT department, so taking care of cybersecurity, taking care of compliance. We have a service desk locally in Colorado. It's not, it's not out of state, and they answer the phones all day long and fix our clients' problems. And then at the higher engineering level, we make sure that they're able to meet compliance for things like healthcare, HIPAA compliance, and then in the defense supply chain, CMMC compliance, which the final rule was released last year, and that's our relationship with Shawn Murray here, is really working with the defense supply chain to make sure that they meet all the requirements and protect, our infrastructure to support the warfighter.
I think that's what I love about your story is you and your wife started this business. That's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and we're still married.
I know,
so
that's awesome.
24 years later, and the business is still going and growing.
Yeah. Shawn, how about you?
Good stuff. So right out, from Massachusetts, right out of high school, I think in my junior year, I did the delayed enlistment program, and don't go open general. So you end up either as a cop or a cook. So, based on my scores, it was all mechanical, technical, electrical. Couldn't write my name, so all of that stuff that was low scores. But came in as a nuclear weapons mechanic. So signed up for one tour. I worked on Alcom-Schrams, Minuteman IIIs. They call it, that was the AFSC was 463, which is, they call it the glow in the dark crew. So like I said, there's not a lot of jobs on the outside for that. So I signed up for one tour, got out, came home. And after a couple of years of, working for dad's business, doing excavation construction with uncles and stuff like that, dad got me a job out in Las Vegas doing construction. This is about like 89 time frame. I moved out there, and it's hot in Vegas doing construction. So went to school for radio, television, broadcast engineering, and got a job part-time as a DJ and doing other stuff. And 20s were kind of a blur, and decided I need more structure in my life. So I followed a gal that was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base over to Germany, and that didn't work out. So I said, well, I could go back to Vegas, or, I could bum around Europe, but I ended up getting a job on base, and the rest is history. I met my now wife of 27, it'll be 27 years this year, and I've traveled around, spent 12 years as a government guy with the Air Force, and transitioned with my wife. We got stationed back at Hanscom Air Force Base, where I became the IT director for most of the Army, Navy calls it the MWR, Air Force calls it services. So I was 500 computer systems in 40 locations in 2 states, all kinds of weird stuff. So think of, I'm doing IT maintenance on the pin setters at the bowling center and the Aero Club hangar, doing the flight simulator to the youth programs and their database sensitive information. So it was my first official, I dabbled in IT, but did that for a while. We got stationed out here in Colorado. My wife got assigned out at Peterson. I didn't transition into another government job. I worked out at Fort Carson, working hazardous materials out there, haz waste, hazmat, and became the program manager out there. And then when we lost that contract to a small business set aside, I went out to the Missile Defense Agency and worked ground tests there, transitioned to the branch chief with my company called Sparta, which got acquired by a British defense firm and then by Parsons, their big defense firm here. Became the branch chief, and at that point in time, Obama signed a couple of executive orders for establishing the cybersecurity framework and our national critical infrastructure, which I think we'll talk about a little today. From there, that just opened things up to travel around the globe doing assessments on national critical infrastructure, weapon systems, coalition systems. So I've been doing government work for a long time. My company, we established in 2004. So we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. 2 lines of business, training and certification, and then consulting. And, met this guy a little while ago, and we've been we have a shared love for soccer and IT. So
Cool.
This is how we got here.
And
today.
that company being Murray Security Solutions Services.
Murray Security Services. And then we have another organization we started about 6 years ago. We formalized into an LLC 2 years ago, the Cybersecurity First Friday LLC, but Cybersecurity First Friday event.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because you're telling me Blake was a speaker at the last one or one of the most recent ones?
Actually, CCS and Blake was the sponsor for this month's event. We've already sold out all the events sponsorship for 2025. Wow. What started 6 years ago was more of a B2B in the local community. There's a lot going on here. We're big aerospace and defense, and we had 35 people that we all met together at the Phantom Canyon at the top floor. And the whole idea is to network and see how we could help each other out. Where I don't want to do work, maybe I have a partner like, Blake and I. And then, the pandemic hit. I got asked to participate, volunteer on the Pikes Peak Workforce Center board. Then representing IT and cyber, got asked to go into the leadership. So I became part of the executive board, working with county commissioners, and learned a lot more about how complex workforce issues are in our community, and 400 to 600 transitioning military veterans that want to stay here and get jobs, but it's expensive. All those complexities, right? So we incorporated veteran outreach. Mount Carmel's one of our partners as well. We've got the Honor Flight and Honor Bell and several other veteran organizations we like to highlight. But we outgrew every place that we went, and eventually we ended up at the National Cybersecurity Center. Now we have between 300, sometimes 400 people a month coming out to our event. Blake was a sponsor last month. He's going to be the sponsor again in April. The whole idea is listen to 3 or 4 different organizations contributing to the ecosystem. They get 5 to 10 minutes to tell us who they are, what they're doing. And then it's networking. The sponsor pays for all the food and beverage.
That's awesome.
So it's great.
If someone's never been there before, what might entice them to come to this event?
Well, so free food and beverage usually entices people. So that's usually a big draw. But
networking is a huge part of this.
The networking piece is, especially after the pandemic, right? People were just, they were locked in their houses, couldn't go anywhere, and so we actually went virtual during that time frame, and we became an international event. We had people from all over. But if you're looking for a job, it isn't my job to get you your job. It's to bring the community together. Village, raises a child. We incorporated little green stickers on your name tag that says, I'm looking for a job. And then we've also incorporated little blue stickers on your name tag that says, I'm hiring.
Nice.
And then we decided, because it's a large defense community, red sticker, and it's all voluntary. You have, it says I'm cleared. So we want green stickers to meet blue stickers, and if you got a green sticker or a red sticker, it tells somebody immediately that you have a clearance. We have a job board. We have our own website that's got lots of resources on there. And so we make the announcement on there. There's a job board, announcement board. So if people have got things going on, they can submit it themselves. We approve it, and it goes out. But yeah, it's turned into a place to network, a place for B2B to find out what's going on, networking. We have county commissioners. We've, Congressman Lamborn, thank you for his service for all those years. His team would come out to keep up on things because he was on the House Armed Services Committee. Had a conversation at Blake's. Blake's hosted a party out there at the last Switchbacks Championship game, and Congressman Crank and I had a good conversation. He kept most of Lamborn's staff, so we're having those conversations related to cybersecurity and privacy in our community and in defense, so within the government. So he's still interested. These are all the types of people that come to the event. So students all the way up to our elected leaders.
Yeah, that's an awesome opportunity. Just go ahead and share the website real quick.
Yeah, so it is www.cybersecurityfirstfriday.com.
Easy enough.
Yeah.
So
I think one thing that you mentioned is you're not there necessarily, helping people find a job, but it's the networking piece of it. And when I was talking to Larry Plummer from UCCS, one of the things he brought up too is you have to be an advocate for yourself. You don't just show up to any of these. You have to repeatedly show up, and you start building those relationships. A lot of the same people are at every one, and you got to get to know them and start building that. You don't just walk in and find a job most of the time.
Yeah. Yep. People want to understand your personality before they just hire you, and you might qualify for the job, but let's become friends first, at least business partners.
Well, and it's the power of that network, right? Who do you know that's in it? Somebody that knows somebody else, and you don't get your next job on a resume on somebody. And that's the other thing. If you do a job post, it has to go to a person that's going to receive that. It can't go to go out to the big company XYZ, and it just goes into a black hole somewhere. But the whole idea when you're going out there is if you go to the First Friday website, for example, we have ambassadors, people that are just as impassioned about what we're trying to do as well. And they have a name tag that says Cybersecurity First Friday Ambassador. And they will help you navigate, because it can be overwhelming for some people when they show up. But we've had people get certified through resources through the Workforce Center. And then they came back and then they got a job because they got certified. And now they got a raise and they got a promotion. They went somewhere else. And so it's great to hear these success stories, and shows that we're making an impact.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'll definitely be at the next one, and hopefully a lot of our listeners will be there as well, at least local listeners.
Yeah, and there's all the resources that they present, because they talk about the different cybersecurity events that are happening, seems like every week around town. And then UCCS is there. And so you also find out different educational opportunities. And, and especially for veterans, a lot of them don't know there's free training out there for them. There's also high-end training that you don't know exists that you can go pay for. But, if you're just starting out and trying to find your way around here, it's a great spot to start and figure out where you fit into the whole ecosystem of cyber and IT and defense and space and all that.
Yeah, you got to talk to people who are already doing it.
Well, and to his point, we have a community calendar that's part of the presentation and on our website that says, oh, you like coding? Well, this group meets on this time every month, or you like to do web development, or you like to do this. There's some type of chapter of professional organizations that literally we tell them in the community, depending on what it is that you like to do. And then we do have 4 strategic partners for the First Friday. So the National Cybersecurity Center, which is where we actually do the event, UCCS, University of Colorado Springs, we're at the cyber campus. They own the whole building, and so they're a strategic partner. The Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC. So my co-host is Vinny Persichetti from there when he separated from the Air Force as the communications NCO. Well, he was the he was the chief. He retired as the superintendent there. We started this thing up, and I'm like, hey, credibility, chamber, us, and we can make this happen. And then, so it's the chamber, Murray Security Services, UCCS, and the NCC are the 4 strategic partners that make all that happen. So,
what an awesome opportunity.
Yeah.
So CCS IT Pros, Murray Security Services, where are you guys at in today's technology landscape for cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time because the federal government has now put actual teeth in their cybersecurity requirements, and so it's always been a really good idea, and there's been requirements around it, but there hasn't been teeth in it, and that's really where with the CMMC, the Cyber Maturity Model Certification,
Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Yep.
And so that is now, the final rule came out last year, and now anybody in the defense supply chain that deals with we're not talking cleared stuff, we're talking blueprints and controlled unclassified information that is not secret, but it's all over the place. Construction companies have it. People that are making little bits of steel or little bits of parts for weapon systems or whatever, they have to meet this new requirement, and it has to be done this year. And so now, and the government's come down with the requirements in the past for cybersecurity. Healthcare is a huge example, right? 20 years ago, the federal government came down and said, hey, you've got this thing called HIPAA and high tech, and you must have all these cybersecurity tools in place. Unfortunately, it's reactive. If you have a breach, then somebody looks, but most of the time, the government's not coming in and looking and seeing if you're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing. And so it's been a real hard push to get providers to have all the tools in place. This is actually a hard requirement that you have to have that last word, the certification. You have to go through this process with these organizations that come in and do a full-scale audit so that you can actually bid on a contract.
And before that, 20 years ago, it was paper medical documents. So I feel like this is really just hockey stick as far as the requirement for cybersecurity, just with technology. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, you go back to just the healthcare alone. So HIPAA was passed in '96, and we called it PHI, personal healthcare information, which is a form of PII, right? So fast forward, now we're processing, transmitting, and storing it. And to Blake's point, now we refer to it as ePHI, electronic personal healthcare information. Well, that's sensitive information that needs to be protected in all of those different areas. How am I storing it? How am I transmitting it? Well, when we look at the government side, I could tell stories going all the way back to the director of DSS. I was at the Quantico, was presenting at the Quantico National Security Conference, 2017-ish timeframe that I recall. And as the keynote, I got to sit at the VIP table, and I'm sitting there with directors for the federal government, and I had an opportunity to talk to the director of DSS, who's a former counterintelligence officer for CIA. I'm like, hey, so what's the deal on this FOU, this sensitive information? He goes, I could care less about that. I'm worried about protecting classified information in the defense industrial base. He goes, somebody needs to own it. I think it's important. But it has been kicked around for how many years, Blake? And they finally parked it with NARA, the National Archives. So the whole idea is an executive order came down that says there's no more caveats for federal, agencies to say, okay, FOUO or SBU or SINWITI or whatever. It's all CUI now, CUI. And they parked it under National Archives. And then they said, well, there's 2 types of CUI, right? There's CUI basic and then there's CUI specific. The specific is the real sensitive stuff. But there's never been an approach looking at the supply chain mandating the scrutiny. Well, if you look at China's 5th gen, 6th gen, and Russia's 5th gen, 6th gen aircraft, they look very similar to ours. Our naval vessels, same thing. It's a poster child as to why this is really important. But what it really comes down to is the small business, how can they afford to stay in business doing, I may make this one part that goes into a weapon system that Northrop Grumman or Boeing or Lockheed manufactures, but you are part of that supply chain. And so I think there's more work to be done in negotiating the requirements and the accountability, but it's got to be cost effective for the small business. And that's what Blake and I think, Blake and I, between our organizations, think that we can come in and provide a reasonable approach. I've been doing this stuff for 30 years. And so I know what it costs and what it doesn't cost. There's a lot of snake oil salesmen out there right now. CMMC is the next big thing, and you need to be compliant. And, they're selling all kinds of snake oil. But, we're veterans. We've been doing this, for 20, 30 years. And I think we've got a better approach on it from the interpretation to the implementation side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this whole subject to me is very foreign, and it's quite scary in my opinion. I hear a lot of talk about the future of warfare is going to be cyber warfare. Do you guys have any take on that? Or?
I don't think there's any such thing as cyber warfare. I've had this conversation with flag officers and leaders in that side. So cyber for a commander who's engaging in any type of warfare is a tool in the toolbox.
Right.
And so it's a big one now because we've connected everything. But cyber warfare itself, will go after national critical infrastructure. We'll shut things down. We'll disrupt supply chains. But using cyber as a weapon, I don't think you're going to win the war with just that perspective. And I'll pass it over to Blake for his take on it. But it's a tool in the toolbox for the commander.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one part of the battlefield, right? You still got to, the Army guys still got to go, take control of the battlefield, right?
Yeah.
And so, regardless of how much you fly over and, bomb stuff or attack it cyber-wise, you still need the Army guys to, you need the ground guys to go in and actually take the ground,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And, I was just, I was listening to Hogs in the Sand, really good book. It's about an A-10 pilot in Gulf War. And so, but I mean, they went in and destroyed everything in Iraq, right? And just laid waste to it. But, Saddam didn't capitulate until, the Army went in. So I was with the 3rd ACR at the time, and we rolled up alongside Kuwait or Iraq, and Kuwait, and ended up, it was then 6 days later that, he actually, decided to give up and surrender. And so the Air Force alone couldn't do it. Same thing with cyber. They're not going to be able to do it by themselves.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. We're talking like very macro scale right now, national defense, cybersecurity. How about down to the micro scale, like just your everyday layman who uses his internet to pay bills and that's really it? How important is this kind of stuff for that person? Or do you guys even really deal with that?
Well, we got to keep up with it, right?
Yeah. And I think everybody needs to be concerned about it because it keeps changing so fast. And so the individual that's out there, the individual computer user that's out there that, that has an internet connection and has a phone is a great risk, because now, especially with AI, someone can take this recording and spoof our voices, especially after we talk for an hour. They're going to be able to sound just like us, right? And then, your grandfather gets a call, your grandmother gets a call going, "Hi, it's Taylor, and I'm sitting in jail in Juarez, and I need money," right? And it sounds just like you.
Yeah,
and they're going to be able to do even better, social engineering and all the research on you to know how to pretend to be you. And so that's one thing they're going to learn more about. It's easier to learn more about businesses. It's easier to craft a real email. Use it to translate a letter sometime or, a business letter, and it'll dump it into Spanish, German, Russian super fast. So you don't need an English speaker to write these, scam emails anymore. Yeah. And so the threats keep coming up and increasing, and people, your average person out there, whether they're in business or they're just at home, using it personally, need to be more careful, as time goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I told you I like to do presentations. I got invited last year. I was also the president of the largest information cybersecurity association in the world called ISSA. So the Information Systems Security Association. I got invited out to open the national conference in Poland. And the conversation that I opened with, the title of the presentation was artificial intelligence, deep fakes, and disinformation. So different information being one of three parts of what we call information disorder. We're all military. We understand that. And we got all that training back. That's been around for thousands of years, right? We used to call it propaganda. But to Blake's point, with, generative AI now, earlier about this time last year, there was a large global financial organization in Hong Kong. The comptroller was requested to make a $25 million transfer. Well, that meets the gate of he has to have an in-person, and it can be virtual, call with at least two of the executive board, including the CFO, the chief financial officer. And so he is having a live Zoom meeting with several executives, and in that meeting, he was provided the permission by two of the executives, the CEO and the CFO, to execute the $25 million transfer for this business purpose. The only human being that attended that meeting was the comptroller. Deepfake technology and generative AI is so good now that it was able to replicate and represent several humans that were not in attendance to that meeting. And so now we're looking at what is the next generation technology to prevent that. So if you're on LinkedIn right now, any social media platform right now, 10% of all social media profiles are what we call sock puppets. They're not even real humans. Okay. They're digital representations of humans, and they're interacting with you. Back to his point, right? So they're learning everything about you. What do you like? What are you clicking on? What are you scrolling on? And I see it. I'm so in tune to it. I'm like, I'm on Amazon. Oh, you like this? You like that? You like this? You can't do anything anonymously anymore, right? And so they're painting a profile on you all the time. There's that algorithm that, everything that is you. But to your point, down to if we don't know it at the micro level, we don't know how to educate people. And that's one of those other things that we do at the First Friday event is we educate people what the real threats look like. Like this block on TikTok, I think it's a great idea. I think it's too late. But I think it's a great start in the right direction, and you're really not stomping on my First Amendment rights with that. You're actually thinking about national security and the implication of what a foreign country that is our adversary can do with that.
Yeah, tell that to the high schoolers using TikTok, though.
Right? Yeah. Oh, I know. All my kids are on it. So.
Yeah, it's scary stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you asked the question, but I kind of want to have you elaborate. Like, how do you guys, as a massive organization, start to see where it's progressing to, these deep fakes and stuff like that, and how do you begin to counter it? Because you're essentially you're reactive, right? Because you don't know how it's developing. How do you start to react to it?
What you're going to see in the next 5 years is it's a technology you've heard about, but several patents have just been filed. So I've got a partner. We've got a podcast I was explaining to you called The New Cyber Frontier. Dr. Chris Goreg owns several of those patents. His company Blockframe is the sponsor for this month, for February's First Friday. But you're going to see a public ledger, blockchain technology, creating digital identities to assert that we are who we are and we're not a digital representation. So you're going to see that on your profiles for social media, digital identities. I was reading an article recently, in the next 10 years, there will be no more paper passports or paper or physical licenses. Everything's going to be digital. And it's this technology that Chris and his team has developed that you're going to see providing that attestation, because the public ledger cannot be reversed. Right. And so the idea is, how do we assert that we are who we say we are with a level of certainty and integrity and credibility, so that you and I can have a conversation? Or, it goes right back to our old military days. What's the code word, right? We have a safe word in our family. We've had it since the kids were little. We traveled overseas. What is the code word? What's the safe word that, okay, now I know I'm talking to my dad, right? And so.
Oh, that's a good point. So if you do get that phone call, you already have the safe word.
Well, yeah, but how do I want to communicate that safe word now? Because I don't know that it's like what is. We'll start with the first safe word, and we'll work up to the actual safe word. If you don't have them all, when we're going back and forth, so that's what we're looking at. But that's a form of blockchain, right? Yeah. So give me this one, I'll counter with this. Okay, go to the next one. To the next one. Oh, you don't have this one. Yeah. So now I can't trust you.
Did the kids have the old code book and stuff? Remember that? You like had this pad of paper that you flipped through to authenticate and stuff.
That's an in-person conversation. Phones in the other room.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you know, and so the deep fakes are a huge threat. There was a movie, wasn't there, where they made a whole movie with one of the actresses was dead, right? Was it?
Yeah. So, what was the name of that movie? They finished the movie out because she had passed during the making of the movie, and so they created AI digital representation to finish her in the filming. I can't remember the name of the movie
but it
now.
Looked just like the actress, and you couldn't tell the
difference.
This
technology's been used in that industry for years.
Yeah, and so it's not a far stretch if you're going for big numbers, right? If you're going for to get $50,000, maybe not, but if you're going for $25 million, but then it makes sense. But I think for your average person, your average company right now, one of the things that we work on is just defense in depth, because any one of the security tools can be breached, right? And so, whether it's antivirus or your firewall or you click on the wrong thing, right? So you click on a link that makes it through the email filter. Okay, stuff makes it through all the time. You click on that, then hopefully something like the DNS protection, the web filter stops it and before you get to a bad site and get infected. But even if that happens, then you get infected, then we've got other things like managed detection response with a security operations center. They see that your computer got infected, it's starting to reach out, and it can pull the plug on that. But if they don't catch it and it goes out and encrypts it, then your other layer then is your cyber insurance, followed by your disaster plan and your disaster recovery, so that you can recover from anything, because we can't protect everything. And it's kind of like your house, right? You can have just your normal door locks on your front door, but most people have deadbolts, and then you add an alarm system, and then you add cameras, and then maybe bars on the window. All of that can still be be breached. Then you got your dog. But if it makes it past your dog, then I would imagine, given your background, probably under your bed, you've got one of those little fingerprint firearm, safes.
You don't want to come in my house.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's scary too, though. Even if you come in, because military guy, I did an entire risk assessment based on where my kids are. My master bedroom is at the end of the hall. At the other end of the hall are 3 bedrooms. So I've got to get that adversary before he gets up the stairs. Yeah. If I don't, then I can't use it's hand to hand at that point. Because I can't. I can't risk, going through that gypsum board and hitting one of my kids.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a big enough target, people will spend the money to get through it.
True.
And it's also super automated now. You go out on the dark web and you can buy a tool with 1-800-SUPPORT that you can call and go say, hey, I'm trying to attack this guy Taylor, and it doesn't work. Can you provide me tech support? You give them a credit card and they give you tech support to do it. But
really?
Yeah, we got this bot farm that we can send over there and take down his.
But but talking about home security, it's crazy. Have you watched the stuff on these the football players' houses that were burglarized?
No.
And so Patrick Mahomes and several other very high-end players with mansions, multi-million-dollar houses, and when you see the videos of it, these people have like golf courses and football. But high-end houses, high-end security, and they just arrested 4 Chilean nationals that were part of this ring breaking these houses. And the news was saying they had radio jammers, they had Wi-Fi jammers, they had all these high-end technical tools to break into the houses. Mm-hmm. And so nothing is 100% safe. Yeah. And you'd think that those guys have super high-end security in their houses, because they can afford it.
But if you jam the Wi-Fi, there's no signal to anything.
And that's the point right there is Wi-Fi. So we do, so I've got cameras all over, but I do power over Ethernet. You're not jamming those. You can still disrupt them if you have the right type of jammer. But if the Wi-Fi jamming, we do the power over Ethernet. That basically means there's a cable going into the camera instead of doing the Wi-Fi. We disable the Wi-Fi just because of what you just described. Yeah.
Now I got to reevaluate my home defense plan.
Yeah. I have Wi-Fi cameras because I have them outside to watch the coyotes and bobcats go by.
Yeah.
So,
but not for security.
Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center and the Veterans Voice podcast are partnered with Colorado Computer Support IT Pros to handle all of our computing and technology needs. They are veteran-owned, and they're your team for innovative, collaborative IT services and solutions to enhance and support your Colorado business. Here on the show, we talk a lot about business and entrepreneurship. As businesses grow, it's inevitable that you need to outsource IT services. When that time comes for your business, consider Colorado Computer Support IT Pros.
What the warfighter has today versus 40, 50, 60 years ago, read a book, World War II book, and it's really interesting how those guys are moving around. I went to the desert in 90, and, all we got were big brown pieces of paper on, that had a line on it. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and everything else was basically flat brown surface. How do you navigate around that? Right. And it was cool. We had these things called sluggers, and the technology at the time, it was a green box, and it basically gave you grid coordinates on it, and you had to take and then map that out. Kids today, I can't imagine what it was like, what it's like, put them back in that day and age when they have to pull out a compass and have to navigate.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, in Special Forces, they still teach you like map and compass and everything's in no light, everything's at night. But when you get to your unit, you have all these GPSs and stuff, and you had to then learn how to use all this technology, but you could still always revert back to the basics, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, and the only way that, on the ground 30, 40 years ago, Vietnam, you had a couple little cat's eyes on the back of your helmet. Other than that, you had no idea where your buddies were. Now there's all sorts of technology, right? I imagine you guys have all sorts of crazy stuff when you go out in the field.
Yeah, we have the 18 Echo. It's your Special Forces Communications Sergeant, and I'll send this to a bunch of them. But yeah, they'd be a better host for this podcast than this one. But yeah, they were super nerds. But yeah, let's tell a quick military story real quick, just to break it up, and then we'll get back into what you guys are doing these days. But you guys both told me a funny story before we even started. You guys want to share those, or you want to do something different?
Yeah, so back in September, they had the DC Fly-In, which is the Colorado Springs Chamber of Commerce gets business leaders to, I don't know, there were like 90 people or so that went to DC for several days. And so there was a cyber track, there was a business track, and so at the last night, there was a little bit of a reception. And so Shawn Murray and I and
you're going to tell this story.
and Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Stan Vanderwerf. Yeah.
And so we hung out afterwards at this restaurant, and we're talking cyber stuff. We're talking all over the board for about an hour. Everybody else had left. It got dark. We're in D.C., and our hotel was about a mile away. And we're all like, yeah, let's go ahead and just walk back to the hotel. We can make a mile. The sun's down. It's not hot and sweaty.
Three military guys,
Three military
we're not afraid
guys.
much.
Yeah, one Army guy, and then Shawn and the councilman were Air Force guys. And so, the commissioner pulls out his cell phone. He's like, I know where we're going. And for some reason, I decided to follow the Air Force guy to do land.
I said, the Army guy better be in front.
so tactical up front.
we go, and I know we're going in the right general direction. You can kind of see the malls over here at the Capitol building. I know we're going in the right general direction, but it's dark. It's probably now 9 o'clock at night or something. And we make it back in the neighborhood of the hotel. We end up going down this dark alley that is we can't reach our hotel from. More rats than I've ever seen in my life. It just stunk. It was rotting food.
I think it was a rat. That wasn't a rat. That was a dog.
And these were
a dog eating a rat.
Giant rats running around. So hard lesson learned is when you're on the ground, don't follow the Air Force guys. So, okay, take charge. And so we ended up making it. It was the right hotel. It was just, took one wrong turn and ended up in no man's land. So
yeah, we didn't have the warthog with us. So
yeah, they were probably 10-pound rats. So they were
yeah, they were looking at us. They're like, I can't take 3 of them.
Man,
so
that's funny.
So I did recover. I led them out of the danger zone and made it back to the hotel.
Broke contact from the rats. Got
Exactly.
To the
I think
zone.
somebody might have had a video too of that at some point, and then that was the talk the next morning because that's the reception after everything, and everybody's, hey, where'd you go last night? Well, Blake's out there like, well, we were in the sewers and the alleyways looking for rats.
With a 22 and a mitt. Jeez, that's funny. I want to hear your story, but I want to ask you guys a little bit of a personal question because I'm just picking up on something. You've been married for how long?
Be 27 years this year, yeah.
You and your wife have been together for this
35 years. Actually met her at UCCS.
Yeah.
So I was a cadet up there, and and so she was going to school and working, and we met in about 1987.
Wow.
No, 85. Mm-hmm. Got married in 89. So
yeah. And you guys are both very successful in your line of work. So how important has, both your wife, but just family in general, how have you guys juggled that through pursuing these massive endeavors in your life? And how important has it been to maintain those family ties?
Yeah, it is a challenging juggle, right?
For sure. And I only ask because it's a crazy time in the world right now, and families are struggling. Divorce rates are high. I just hear couples arguing everywhere I go. So I'm really just trying to shed some light on what people are doing right.
Yeah. Well, it's not that we never argue, right?
Oh.
So, but it is very hard. You just have to keep showing up and making the effort. Mm-hmm. And I think, too many people, give up on whatever it is or walk away too easily. Even in family relationships, this came up in conversation with, the inauguration of President Trump is you can't let those kinds of conflicts destroy the family. And you've got to be open to talking and trying to get along with each other. And so, I've tried to be intentional about spending time with my wife and with the kids, scheduling travel, business travel around kid events, making sure you do your darndest to get to, sporting events and concerts and, ballet or whatever the heck the kids are doing, and making sure that you do that. And especially after they're grown, is being intentional about doing it. So, yeah. And we ended up, one of our kids, our youngest, went to UCCS where Christy and I went, and the oldest one works at UCCS and is getting her master's degree at UCCS.
That's cool.
It's sort of this whole UCCS ecosystem. And now I hang out there once a month with Shawn down at the Cybersecurity Center.
Yeah, that's an awesome school. I do a lot of work with their audio engineering interns over there. But how about you, Shawn?
Yeah, it's the same thing, right? So, we're kind of from the same era, right? So Gen Xers, I think I'm 1 year away from being a boomer, but my kids, they call me boomer all the time. I think that's a term of endearment. But the family values we had back then were, you work hard, you play hard, and you take care of what you're supposed to. I had good leadership, mentorship from my dad, my uncles, my older cousins. I was the oldest of 4 in my house. And so there's a sense of responsibility and accountability in those areas as well. So good family unit. I mean, my mom and dad got divorced when I was young, and my mom, and dad separated, and I lived with my mom for a bit, and then most of my life with my dad and my stepmom, and so. You transition in, and then you get married, and you're young, and I'm from Massachusetts. Whoever yells the loudest and wins the argument, and 5 minutes later is like, hey, what's for dinner? My wife, she's a stubborn Swede from upper Michigan and an Air Force brat. I'm not talking to you for like 3 days, dude. So you got to get through that stuff, right? And
there's 3 days of going to bed mad? Is that?
Yeah, and I'm the type of person, I'm like, I can't go to bed if you're still upset with me. I'm like, well, let's talk this out. Well, we'll do that that now, 27 years later, but it doesn't get to that point anymore. I mean, we still get frustrated with each other and the family dynamics and what's pulling us in various directions. When she retired, my work-life balance, I started getting some of that back when she retired a couple of years ago from the Air Force after almost 27 years in the Air Force. And now I have doctor's appointments, I have dental appointments, and we have family time and vacation. And back to your point, resetting the balance to intentionally engage with your children. I'm lucky enough to have all three of them are still local. My son is going to transition. He's a senior at Rampart, but he'll be going to school. He'll be the first one traveling away, going to Montana State. My oldest, she took a sabbatical and decided to go up to Alaska and do some cool wilderness stuff. She's a professional jeeper and worked for an outfit for 6 months doing that. Came back home, and it's a different dynamic today, but to be able to work together, and we're a family-owned business, so they're all employees as well, but you got to be able to separate all that. But my wife and I, we've had our challenges. Separations, nothing like, the Army and the Navy where, you get deployed for, 2 or 3, deployments, 2 or 3 different tours. But, we had our separations and the kids were little, and, it was a realization for my wife at one point when my son, he was like 3, and she's talking, she's in Florida and we're up here, and she says, Liam, do you remember when Mommy used to live at home? No, Mama, you've always lived away. And so she's like, you get your daddy back on the phone. We need to get the family back together. And so we got joint assignments. I was running Army Cyber over in Europe, and she got a job at Launchstoel. And so they brought the kids over there, and they got to experience some culture, and we got to do lots of things. And came back in 2015, went back to the agency. Shelly went up to Buckley, eventually got down to Schriever, and she finally separated. But it is a work in progress all the time, and it's all about time, right? So trying not to, we had a reset a couple years ago. My son got diagnosed with very rare vascular disease. We almost lost him. And I get emotional when I talk about it. But at that point in time, I was on the Workforce Center board. I was in the Women's Chamber board. I was on the World Affairs Council board. I was the Chief Operations Officer for ISSA International. And I was spread too thin. And I'm operating my own business. I literally, in the hospital room that day, dropped off all of my boards, made phone calls to everybody, and dropped off all my boards except for the ISSA International. Sometimes God gives you, hey, here's a reset. What's important? And as long as you recognize it and you take those warnings and those hints, and you've got a strong partner, you can navigate anything.
Yeah. A lot of family just struggles in the veteran community, military community as a whole. So I really like talking about this kind of stuff with everyone I have in here, because we can all learn something from each other when it comes to family. And you guys are doing it right. It's rocky, but you guys are doing it. So good.
Well, and then the resources like Mount Carmel and some of the other ones, educating the community and our veterans and their families about the resources that are available. That's why we're ambassadors. You got to be an evangelist for those resources as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication is key. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I just you talked about the military and coming back. I just found the redeployment book from 1991.
Nice. 1991.
little briefing on what to expect, with the family when you're coming back after being gone for 6 months or a year.
What did it say back then?
And I didn't read through it. I need to pull it out. Maybe we should come back and read
funny.
it.
Probably some good stuff in there.
Yeah, so it was interesting, but I think. Just being intentional. So, Shawn and Shelly and their kids, but all work in the business day to day. My wife is the vice president. She's, partner in the business, but we don't work side by side, throughout the day. And for us, that works. But I talk to her throughout the day. Mm-hmm. And when I'm traveling, I run into people that just completely disconnect from their spouse when they travel, and it just seems so weird to me. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we're checking in every night before we go to bed if I'm on the road, and I think it's that intentionality that's made it work for us, and because it is super hard to to go through the challenges of running a business alone is, just doing that is super hard. Tie in the family dynamics and and trying not to bring too much home from work, trying to, balance all of those stressors, stressors with clients and employees and everything else, along with the stressors at home, and trying to balance that gets really hard. So I think you need people to talk to, you can't do it alone. Someone, you need friends to talk to and hang out with and discuss it with, or a therapist, or whatever it takes. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys getting a little bit personal there, but all for the greater good. Shawn, you got a good story for us?
Yeah, we talked about one that I'll share. Good. So, nuke maintainer. Well, one of our nuke bases is Minot.
Talk a little bit about that, like a nuke maintainer. What did you do, like on a day-to-day?
So, nuke maintainer. So, coming right out of high school, right? Young guy enlisted E1, and they're like, so actually, I wanted to be a helicopter mechanic in the Air Force.
Okay.
And so I literally was 135 pounds dripping wet coming out of high school. I wanted to play football, but I wasn't big enough.
That was me in 6th grade.
Right. And so I wasn't big enough to play football, so I played soccer growing up. And so, I get in the military and, get down to MEPS the first time, right? So to be a helicopter mechanic, you need to lift 100 pounds over your head because of some of the parts and stuff. Well,
at $135.
Well, and I could have done. I was doing roofing jobs, hauling shingles up, but they wanted me to stand like 2 feet back with my toes on this line, reach down for this like bicycle handle that was on the wall, and lift it straight up like this. And I'm like, I was just like an inch away from being able to do that. Oh, sorry, you don't qualify to be a helicopter mechanic. And I want to be a helicopter mechanic because I wanted to own a helicopter one day. Yeah. And who do you trust more than yourself to do the maintenance on it, right? Yeah. So didn't get to be a helicopter mechanic. So now...
Do you have a helicopter?
No, I don't. Never went down that route.
I can help you buy one. They have them in Army surplus.
They're like $2.5 million for a small one. They're not cheap.
The licensing process is very long.
Yeah. So we were in Alaska last September on a cruise, and we went up. We did the glacier thing with the small helicopters. I'm like, hey, how much? This is pretty cool. How much are they? How about 2.5? Like $2.5 million? Yeah. The bigger ones are a little bit more expensive. I'm like, yeah, that's too expensive.
No, if you get them through surplus, they're cheaper. I can help you figure out how to.
You're serious?
I'm serious.
Okay.
I'm serious.
Can you get a baby Huey?
We're buying helicopters.
we got a Green Beret here. We can take that hill.
Can acquire one.
So anyway, I'm not a helicopter mechanic, and they come back and they're like, "Hey, so we got a really special job. How'd you like to work on nukes?" I'm like, "Hell yeah." I want to work on a nuclear weapon. I didn't know what the hell that meant, but well, you're going to be like they call it a nuclear weapons maintainer. So you're a mechanic. What happens is you go into the bay, they secure your work area. There's a rigorous process just to get into the work area because they're nukes, right? And you're on what's called PRP, so personal reliability program, because you're working with nuclear weapons. That means you can't even take an aspirin without permission.
Oh, wow.
Right? So no medications. I mean, you are off. You can't work if you're on any medications or had surgery or anything else like that. So anyway, so I'm PRP. I have a SCI clearance, doing all this. I don't know what any of that meant as an 18-year-old coming out of high school, right? So and so you go into the hangar, and the 4.62s, the BB stackers, come out of the warehouse with this assembly, and they roll it out to the work area. You got to go through all these TOs, what we call technical orders, and then you're authorized to do your work. And so you're taking apart components, inspecting different areas, recording things down. There is actually a TO for everything, and a technical order is though you're being commanded by an officer to do something, and if you deviate from that TO, you can be held UCMJ, right? So if the twist on the bolt to tighten those wires down was 13 twists and you've got 12, that's UCMJ, nuclear surety, you're going to jail type of thing. And there's somebody with you, the buddy system at all times. So you take apart things, you replace certain things, and you put them back together. And it's mainly about inspecting the integrity of everything, put it back together.
Sounds like a very stressful work environment.
It was cool as It's actually sometimes boring.
Oh, okay.
Here's the last thing we had to do to make sure that we didn't create a nick on any part of it. We were required to go over the fins and the seals of the sub-assembly with either tissue paper or toilet paper to see because if there was and you couldn't see it, it would drag on the tissue and tear, and then it had to go to another area and they had to buff all that stuff out. Because even a small nick like that going, at Mach 10, it could create an issue for the weapon.
Wow.
So. Yeah.
Makes sense.
But, mine not. So when you're going into the hangar, you've got a bunch of SPs, so security police. You have LEs and SPs back in the day. LEs were law enforcement driving around the base, but SPs, they were at the flight line. They were all the areas where, you're going into secure areas. And so you were supposed to code in every day before they open the hangar doors. So I show up and every day you get a new code word to code in. So SP, you pick up the phone. The SP that's up in the tower says, okay, code in. He gives you a code. You give him the code, the counter code back. And I gave yesterday's code. Now, let me explain what this is. We're talking about nuclear surety,
Nuclear
right?
weapons.
Right. So if you code in incorrectly, the base shuts down. The wing commander comes out, your commander comes out, and hopefully they get out there to remove the M16 that's stuck in your ass because you're jacked up and you're not going anywhere until everybody shows up. There's a big report that's being I mean, it's a really big deal, right? But it's like 40 something below zero.
Jeez.
And I code in the wrong code. I code in with yesterday's. And so all of a sudden I hear boom, boom, boom. This E7, this master sergeant is like, pick up the phone. And he goes, why don't you try that again, asshole? And I'm like, oh shit, I gave the wrong code. And so I get in the hangar. I'm like, I'm not doing my job today. I'm cleaning toilets with a toothbrush and all kinds of other stuff. But luckily I didn't, get jacked up in 40 something below zero. And so that's one of my favorite stories, but I got 1,000 of them.
What does it feel like being around a nuclear weapon?
Well, yeah, they call you glow in the dark boys, but I think what was more interesting than working on the nukes was before you're able to do that, you have to go through tech school and you learn about the history, the actual history about the development of the atom bomb, all the stuff they did in Sandia and all that, and then you learn about the history of what we actually had and what we told the rest of the world, which I can't go into, of course, but and I was amazed and scared at the same time. But so this is what I'll tell you: what we did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki is like the difference between a marble and a bowling ball to what we have today. If anyone, the United States, Russia, North Korea, Iran, anybody drops a nuclear weapon, it will affect the entire planet. It will get into the atmosphere so high, it'll get into your jet streams. The amount of radiation poisoning that will affect vegetation and wildlife and humans, no one wins at all. Mm-hmm. If a single weapon is dropped based on the yield that we have now, everyone's going to be affected.
Yeah, that's pretty scary stuff.
Have you read On the Beach or seen the movie?
No.
It's a really good book. It's back 40s, 50s, nuclear weapon goes off, and basically, there's nuclear conflict, and it's about they're down in Australia, and the cloud is coming down there, but they know that they've got like a year to live. Everybody else is on the planet's dead, and so they're down there waiting to die, but it's about them going on with life. There's some U.S. Navy that are down there and stuff, but it's a really interesting book. It's about probably 30, 40-year-old book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's one we talked about earlier that I know you've read. It's called 1 Second After. Uh-huh. And the premise is an adversary drops a nuclear weapon about 25 miles into the atmosphere above Kansas. Takes out, so the atmosphere absorbs all the radiation stuff, but you got this electric magnetic pulse that hits Kansas. It takes out like 80% of our national critical infrastructure. And then the focus is on this retired Army colonel who's a high school teacher in West Virginia, and he's driving around his mother-in-law's Edsel, 54 Edsel, because there's no electronics in it, right? But all the other vehicles are dead on, wherever they are. And so then the focus is, it's not about money. Bullets are the means of bartering and trading, and, towns are now villages, and the next village over is an enemy. And so how do you survive doing all that? What's important? There's a focus on his daughter has got type 1 diabetes. I won't ruin it for our listeners, but you've got to start solving problems as though you were 150 years ago instead of today.
Are you a prepper? You might be.
After reading that book, yeah. You can say that.
Hey,
not to the extreme, but
ready. I'm not a prepper. I'm just ready for anything.
That's just it. I'm the same way.
Society will melt down fast.
Right.
So I did pull up so you could get a Bell 206 helicopter for $100,000. You could get a UH-60 for 1.7.
So we'll continue this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Right
Next episode, he'll have a helicopter.
Yeah. We'll have a test drive. We'll have to do the.
I'll do it in the helicopter.
Exactly. I don't know where we're going to get the maintenance on it to trust you flying it. So.
Yeah.
I'll get my 40 acres up in. So I want my 40 acres up in Divide, Florissant, and
Me too.
And I want a little landing strip. So I'm gonna have a hangar, and I'm gonna fly in and out of there when the snow's.
You don't need a landing strip with your helicopter.
I don't. I just need a piece of concrete.
You just need an LZ.
Nice. Helicopters are so cool.
I can go mark that out for you. I did aerosol school in '85, so I know how to clear an LZ and hook stuff up to it.
So I did the Red Horse prime ribs, prime beef training down at Tyndall, so I know where to put the mortuary tent.
Okay.
Yeah, we just had a CH-47 pilot on here on Tuesday. We'll have to check that one out. He was 2 hours of just helicopter stuff.
Yeah, it's cool.
But
maybe we'll get my dad on here remotely.
Let's do it.
He flew CH-53s, was picking up pilots in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And hovering over the jungle.
Yeah. So I wish he was alive now, but my father-in-law was he was a spec ops guy in Nam. He was a C-130 gunner on the Spectres.
Cool.
And the stories that he's got, holy shit.
Those Spectre guys are insane.
Yeah. There's a picture of him hanging out of the side of this thing with a cigar in his mouth.
Just smoking dudes with a 50 cal. Yeah. Well, we'll get wrapped up here, but what's the next few months look like for you guys' businesses? Where are you guys going? What's your plans?
For us, it's very busy. I mean, just with what's going on in the defense world and working with Shawn and trying to help companies make sure that they're ready to bid on contracts and getting that checked off. So that's one of our big emphases. Anyways, one of our priorities, along with continuing to help out. We do a lot of rural health, rural hospitals, people that these 300-person hospitals. There's hundreds of them across the country that you never see because they're out in farmland.
Right.
And they can't find technicians to work. They can't find an IT director, a CIO, any of that that's out there, in Kansas or Colorado, outside of Denver and Pueblo and Colorado Springs. So we come alongside them. So we're working with them to make sure that they're compliant, make sure that they can handle patients and the continuity of care happens, even though they're not in a major city. So.
You don't work with VBOC at all here, do you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah,
no.
That's a huge resource if anyone hasn't heard of it. The Veteran Business Outreach Center here at Mount Carmel. They literally step-by-step how to do government contracting.
Yeah. Well, and they work with, VBOC does any business. So if you want to start a flower business or something else, right? And that's also what they're doing up at the EBV, up at UCCS with Dr. Plummer. But you need those resources. If you're starting a business, find someone to help. I wish I would have done it in 2001, kind of muscled through it. Wife was smart enough to do all the business side. I was nerdy enough to do the tech side, but we didn't have a good, solid business until we found a business coach 7-8 years later.
Right.
And in the process, almost lost the business, almost lost the marriage, almost did all this other stuff because didn't know how to run a business, and that's where VBOC can come in and do.
Yeah, those resources like Apex used to be PTAC and small business development centers and SCORES. Those are great resources in the community for all of that. If you're a veteran, you get some additional resources like we're VBOC and some of the other stuff. But for us, we just landed a big subcontract with Homeland Security, providing training over the next 6 months, literally almost back-to-back training, big contract. So we must have done well enough last year that they tripled it. So that's the training side. And then, we're looking to go out and be selective in our approach where we're going to do this compliance stuff. There's plenty of work to do. Helping those small businesses, and the complexity we find out when we just had a recent engagement with a potential client here. By the end of the meeting, he didn't think he had anything. By the end of the meeting, he realized that you got a government assessment coming up, and this is the reason why. Let's dig into it. So we're demonstrating why we're the choice to be able to help these organizations out. We're not going to go out and chase everything. We're going to chase those things that make sense, and we work well together. We'll see how. But the year's starting to shape up really good, so we're going to be busy.
Yeah. I think if I can, one thing that I think is unique about our relationship is there are companies that will come out and help these companies in the defense supply chain do it all. They'll come in and do the IT, they'll do the documentation, they'll do the business side of it and everything else, and the audit prep. The problem with that is, the way that we work is, CCS IT Pros goes in and does the projects, does the management of the network, management of the cybersecurity tools, the service desk, helping them do the day-to-day operations and lock everything down. Where Murray Security Services comes in is they do the business side of it. So they come in, all the documentation and, policies, procedures, the POAM, which is the strategic plan, the security plan. But one of the key things that they do for us or for the client is they do the audit prep. So they come in and audit the work that we're doing, which I think, from a preparation standpoint is key, but I think also from almost an ethical standpoint is you need someone else checking on you. It's kind of like going out and building a house. You don't go out and have a house built for you and then have the home builder, not only build the entire house, but do the final inspection too. You have the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department come out and inspect it all along the way, because even it might be a great builder, there may be problems in the work that they did or one of their subs. And then if you're a smart homeowner and smart home buyer, my wife's a realtor and she thinks that everybody that gets a brand new home should still have an inspector come out and have it inspected besides the regional building department. Because otherwise, those inspectors come through and they're just, doing some checks. The home inspector will come in and check everything top to bottom and be your advocate.
Yeah, and we tried to do everything, and then we weren't doing well on any of it. And so we drew back and changed our strategy. Focus on our core competencies and partner with other organizations that are like-minded, same integrity, same ethical business type of relationships, and that's who I want to do business with. And I'd rather bring in a partner to help solve a problem and go in that direction. I'll sleep better at night. I can share the wealth and have good relationships.
Yeah. Last question I'll ask. You guys have both started a business from literally nothing into what it is today. Just quick words of wisdom to a veteran who might be pursuing something like that as well. He just got out of the military, has this huge business idea, maybe 6 months into it. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Just how do you motivate that guy?
So I belong to it's kind of like a social club of dudes. We call it the dudes. And there's probably about 40 of us together, right? And so some of us play soccer, but the whole idea is we help mentor each other, just like our dads used to do, right? And so if you've got experience in one, We've got a guy that I play soccer with and another guy, they decided they were tired of working landscaping at this organization that was ripping people off and they were contributing to that. And so they're like, we can do this better. And so I got them over to the Small Business Development Center, the Pikes Peak Small Business Development Center, and he started getting mentoring on, hey, this is how you create a business plan. This is the things that you need to do. This is how you file articles of organization. These are the, if you're looking for capital. And so, the whole idea is the power of the network. We've said it several times, right? And so you've got to get with people that are, that you trust, that may have experience or know somebody else that does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Ask questions to people who've already been there.
Yeah, and let me share the mistakes I made so you don't make them yourself. And, back to your point, right? So at some point, especially family-owned business, don't let your business ruin your personal relationships because that can happen.
Yeah.
And you just got to separate that.
Yeah. Yeah, and, you learn in the military that, you just never give up. You keep moving forward. You keep working. You know how to work really hard. You know how to suffer. You know the suck. You know all this stuff. So you've got the wherewithal to go start a business, but you don't know. It's completely different than when you were active duty and you didn't have to worry about, where the money was coming from and everything else. So I think one of the big things that we learned is, like I said, my wife Christy knew how to do the business side of it. So we made sure we paid taxes, we made sure we registered with the state and all this other stuff so we could run the business. But trying to run the business and find employees and find clients and all this stuff is what, ends up killing a business, trying to get invoices out. And, I didn't go out and reach out and get the help that I should have, whether, and it wasn't until, seriously, my wife, 1 o'clock in the morning is just like, one day I remember it clearly. Why don't you get an effing job? And that's what happens is you can't run the business and invoice and everything else and make enough money to keep the wheels going. Yeah. And you end up going and getting a job. And so, we ended up finding a business coach, have been in a relationship with him a long time. But I think that's key is find someone to help you figure out how to run a business, how to market, how to sell, how to hire people, how to fire people, how to all of the things that it takes to run a business. And I wish I would have done that 6-7 years earlier. And for veterans getting out, there's so many free resources. There's the IMVF, the Institute of Veterans
Military Affairs.
So through Syracuse University, they have free resources. You have SCORE, you've got the Veterans Business Outreach Center, you've got Mount Carmel and all the stuff that they do. There are a ton of free resources to get started before you spend money on a coach. Ultimately, if you really want to get mature, you're probably going to spend serious money on a business coach or advisor. And then make the effort to follow up and work on it. Those people aren't going to run you down. Right. You're going to go meet with them, and then you have to put forth the effort to continue the relationship, to go meet with them and to learn and be a sponge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you got to chase your dreams. They don't chase you back.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And the other piece too is, what is it that you think that you're going to be able to do with a business that sets you apart from your competitors? Yeah. Understand that, because if you think that you're going to come out and invent some great new process or something that you got to understand what it is that you want to do. You got to focus on that, because we've both tried to, conquer world peace, right? But you can't. Focus on core competencies. What is it you're going to contribute, and focus on that. The more you bite off, of course, the more you've got to chew, but look at that work-life balance as well, because you need the support from your friends and your family. Don't dismantle that. You need to coddle both of those.
Yeah, I think your dreams do chase you when you give up on them. Then they haunt you, though.
Yeah. And check out what you want, the business that you want to do. Really do research on it and find out the success rate of it, the cost to get into it. What's that look like? Because opening a restaurant is way different than what Shawn and I are doing. Yeah. And our barrier to entry to do what we do, we could start it as one guy and a computer, right? You open up a restaurant and you've got massive loans and a lot of prep work, and find out what you're passionate about. Are there enough people out there buying it to make it viable. So many companies, you see it and they end up shutting down because nobody wants what they're selling or not enough
Market
people.
saturation. Yeah.
You need a customer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Blake, Shawn, I appreciate you guys coming on the Veterans Voice podcast. A lot of good stories, a lot of wisdom on both business and family. So I really appreciate you guys' insight.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we'll see you at First Friday.
First Fridays, check it out. Website's in the
come on out.
description.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Cool.
Good stuff.